Before I introduce the next introducer, I wanted to share one other bit of happy news about your school. Every time we're reminded of a graduate who wins the Public Service Award in the Pulitzer Prize competition, or the Selden Ring, or the Polk Award, or any of the other honors that so many of you have participated in, we're reminded that the school speaks not just for this body of alumni, but also for the whole university. And each year, this time of year, the university selects half a dozen honorees for doctorates and for a Medal of Excellence, representing the very best values and achievements of not just Columbia alums, but anybody in our society. And this year, the university has awarded the Medal of Excellence to one of your own from the class of '99, the New York Times reporter Andrea Elliott. Well known for her amazing immersion reporting on the streets of New York, which she no doubt learned on the first week of her RW1 class. So to move on, it's my pleasure to introduce another member of the class of 1970 and another longtime great leader at this school, whose contributions you may not all appreciate, but really, in my experience on these 2 years and on the Board of Visitors, really one of the most stalwart and thoughtful alumni leaders that the school enjoys, Simon Lee.
Margie McBride attended this school during the very era now being depicted in the final season of Mad Men. She graduated into a world of journalism and network television news as dominated by men as the Madison Avenue of Donald Draper. Decision makers in 1970 were, as one old quip goes, pale, Yale, and sometimes stale. For 30 years at NBC, Margie Lehrman, as she became, was part of remaking that culture. She overcame barriers with talent, grit, and hard work, while also working to improve diversity and the role of women in journalism. For that, we all owe her thanks. Today's students graduate into an imperfect world, but one in which routine discrimination is diminishing. America's news viewers also owe her thanks. The world we see on our screens today is much wider and a more interesting place because of those now in position to make news decisions. By the time Margie retired in 2009, she had been deputy chief of NBC's Washington Bureau for 6 years, directing a staff of more than 200. She was also repeatedly the go-to pool producer for major national and international news events, elections, state funerals, international summits. She had won 2 Emmys for commanding coverage that had to satisfy 5 television networks, as her journalism, diplomacy, and warmth commanded their respect. Familiars at NBC exhaust the thesaurus for positive words about Margie. Competent, cool, thoughtful, fair, generous. Her journalistic standards were always the best and the highest. And perhaps best of all for a producer, you always knew she had your back. She was always there for you. Her classmates, the class of 1970, feel the same way about her. Over the decades, I have learned much more about her support for the school and for our class, of course, her support for her other alma mater, the University of Oregon, where she and husband Michael have set up a fellowship for graduate students in need, her help for foreign students, her service in the Peace Corps, and even that she held a pilot's license, flying back from Paris and island hopping in the Caribbean. I had the great good fortune to call Margie my first friend in America. Earlier this month, the columnist David Brooks wrote an unusual personal essay in which he mentioned that sometimes you meet a person who radiates an inner light. And he went on to write about how he might have achieved what he called resume virtues, but was still struggling with what he called eulogy virtues. It's my privilege to introduce you today to a distinguished alumna who is such a person and who has achieved an enviable balance of those virtues. Margie Lehrman.
To be correct, I think Simon called me his oldest friend in America. He's also the person in our class who taught me never to invite people out for Chinese. It's for Chinese food. Excuse me, I have some allergies going on here. I had the privilege of introducing Simon when he received his Alumni Award a few years ago. And Simon, thank you for generously doing this. I appreciate it. Dean Cole, Maria, and families, friends, fellow alumni, thank you. Congratulations to my fellow award winners here, especially you, Irina, and my classmate, Paul Neely. When I learned I was getting this award, I was shocked. One reason, I'd nominated 3 of my classmates for it, plus Irina. And another is it's unusual for people who work behind the scenes to be recognized. For me, this is a huge honor, because it comes from my peers, because it comes from this school that helped change my life, and because it recognizes behind-the-scenes work. I'm delighted some of the other winners today also work behind the scenes, because as most of us who do know, to work behind the scenes often means your parents don't have a clue what you do. My parents never did figure it out. In fact, when I left the Today Show as Washington producer to become Tim Russert's deputy in Washington, my dad thought I'd been demoted. Although my parents, Jack and Ruth McBride, no longer are with us, they've remained a standard for how I evaluate news. What would my parents sitting out in the middle of Oregon want to know? And what do my parents sitting out in the middle of Oregon need to know? Oregon's where I grew up. Oregon's where I had my first experience with a great teacher. Columbia's another. But let me tell you about Oregon. I went to public school in the little farming town of Madras in Central Oregon, population then 1,836. High school was about 400 students drawn from the entire county. High school is where I met the teacher who changed my life, E. Howard Hillis. Mr. Hillis taught journalism. Mr. Hillis, in fact, taught journalism so well that our high school newspaper won every national award available to a high school paper of any size. It had been doing so for about 10 years when I was invited to join the journalism class my sophomore year. School newspaper was written and edited by students, 22 pages, published every 2 weeks, and more people read it than the local weekly. Because this was back in the days before computers, Mr. Hillis made sure that our class had a card filled out by every student in the school. Names spelled correctly. Birth date, no excuse for getting someone's age wrong. Names and years of siblings. Names and address of parents. So we would never misidentify Tom Jones, son of yada yada. Huge calendar was on the wall, so you never had a reason to write April 1st, Monday, April 1st, when you meant Monday, April 2nd. The point was just drilled into us. Get it right. Accuracy impacts your credibility. Every 2 weeks when the paper came out, Mr. Hillis would stand in front of the class with the latest edition with big red circles on it. Each of these circles was what we call today a teachable moment. Who wrote this subhead? What does it mean? Is this quote accurate? Who's the source of this information? Why didn't you talk to so-and-so? A Rolling Stone could have used an E. Howard Hillis. After 3 years of journalism with Mr. Hillis, I was hooked. I'm so grateful I got to visit Mr. Hillis before he died and thank him for the impact he had on my life. Here's to Mr. Hillis and to every great teacher out there, including many of you here in this room. We've all had them. Before I sit down, I want to acknowledge some other people important in my life. My sister, Elizabeth Liz Menashe, who traveled out here from Portland, Oregon. You can wave. My instructor pilot and husband of nearly 45 years, Michael Lehrman. My dear friend June Lee, who let me borrow Simon today, thank you. And the class of 70. Yay! My dear friends and people from whom I've learned so much and who I adore. The class of 70 is so special. In fact, we have 4 previous Alumni Award winners, and I'd like them to stand. Simon Lee, Rena Peterson, Rick Smith, and Walt Mossberg, who had to leave. Finally, I'd like all the previous Alumni Award winners in the room to stand. There must be others out here. Yes. Yes. To you all, happy Alumni Weekend. Enjoy your reunions. And thank you for this Alumni Award.